Welcome to the Spiritualpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Christian, aka Love Pixel. And in each episode, we sit down with spiritual entrepreneurs sharing their knowledge, wisdom, and tools on their path to authentic success. Let's dive in. What's up, beautiful people? This is Christian from the Successful Spiritualpreneur Podcast. And today, I'm super excited because we have another guest on the show. His name is Justin Foster, and he's the co-founder of Massive Change, an advisory firm that is helping nonprofit leaders and entrepreneurs build just and equitable brands. Raised on a cattle ranch in Oregon, Justin brings a no bullshit approach to leadership and business. Now based in Austin, he has spent 2 decades delivering heretical brand coaching, distilling complex ideas into potent high impact messaging, and he is a master of language. He's an author of 4 books and a prolific writer of essays, poetry, and songs. At his core, Justin is a poet, agitator, and strategist, fiercely challenging entrenched power and questioning the narratives that uphold the status quo. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Thank you, Christian. It's an honor to be on.
Love it. So tell me, how do you combine being a poet and business?
Well, I think the main thing of that is poetry is a mindset more than an output. And my framework for sort of being in the world is a mixture of, or kind of a blending of consciousness and complexity. You can say science and spirituality too, but it's really it boils down to that. So poetry is the bridge between those two things. Poetry takes complex things and makes them easier to understand. But in order to be a poet, you have to have consciousness. And also, the poet sits in the middle of change, of evolution. Sometimes they're the agitator of change. Sometimes they're the explainer of change. And so for me, when I apply my other skills to it, it is then delivered to the world as being a fractional CMO or a brand strategist or a brand coach. And so not everybody that practice consciousness and complexity ends up being those things. But I think everybody in that space, in that crease, is a poet.
Beautiful. I love that. And so how do you, let's say, for other people out there, like how can we apply this concept of poetry or this philosophy of poetry into building a brand? Like how would you guide someone? Let's say I'm new, I kind of know what I want to do. I'm interested into, let's say, tea. What can I, like, how can I apply it to that concept and build a brand around that topic?
So as I said, at the essence of poetry is distilling complexity down into something that can be understood. That also is what messaging is supposed to do. Messaging is not supposed to be a blunt force weapon. It became that. I give a keynote called Blame It on Ed, and it's about the history of marketing and branding from Edwin Bartell, who was Freud's nephew, who took his teachings and studies of psychology and applied it to what became, that's why Bartell's called the godfather of propaganda. And most people don't realize this, is that all happened in the 1920s. It was sadly adopted by Nazi Germany. Then it was adopted by Mao Zedong, and then it was adopted by Madison Avenue. And it became common in advertising to justify gaslighting of people, to manipulate people into buying things that they don't want to buy, don't need, all based off of agitating their inner fears. And there's a term in sales called FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's all a mental or emotional abuse. Well, poetry doesn't do any of that. Poetry makes you think. Poetry expands your mind, not contracts it. Poetry helps you see things that you wouldn't otherwise see. Well, that's all the same job as a marketer is supposed to have. And you can't, poetry doesn't make something boring interesting, which a lot of times in marketing, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to take something that's soulless or useless, and they're trying to turn a poop sandwich into an ice cream cone. And that's not the purpose of marketing either, but it's so normal and it's become normalized and justified to do that. If you think like a poet, you have to work with real material. If you think like a poet, it has to produce value. And most of all, it has to produce feeling. If it doesn't produce feeling, you're not doing marketing, you're just spending money. And when it works because you're usually playing off of people's fears, or you're just lucky. And so I don't say start with poetry. When I'm coaching someone on their brand, I have them start with their philosophy. What kind of poet, if you want to put it into that language? What is your core philosophy? Which includes your core beliefs, your virtues of how you live in the world, your natural gifts and your learned skills. It's all of this intrinsic stuff. And then it becomes poetry when you put it out into the world. Like, how do you write copy? How do you explain what you do? How does your bio read? All of it should be poetry. And I love to point out that in the late 1800s and early 1900s, most of the ad copy that was written by rising or authors before they were famous. So Ernest Hemingway or Louis L'Amour, or you go down the list. There's a bunch of them, and that's why it's so compelling. It's like they were trying to tell a story. They weren't trying to. There was no mass media. It was just trying to tell a story. Like, go back and read a Stetson ad or a Red Wing boot ad. They're amazing little stories. Nike's always been good at this, but they were kind of the exception.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I love that concept, and I feel part of what we do at Love Pixel, because I have an agency called Love Pixel Agency, and we build websites, funnels, brands, systems for people in the personal branding space. And our secret sauce, our poetry is love. Like, and a little bit more concrete, the mission is to make love tangible, right? So
Yes.
at every step of the way, when you look at your product, your brand, your website, like, you want to give people the feeling of like, wow, this is amazing,
Yes,
right?
that's right.
And if
Yeah.
we
And
achieve that, then goal achieved,
yes, exactly. And this is why intention matters so much, is you can't bullshit the heart. Like energy is real. And it's actually, when I say energy, I mean spiritual energy, but I also mean, like, there's a word for this actually in brain science called neurocoupling, which is sort of a fancy word for trust. And so they've done these studies where when someone loves a brand and it really is part of their identity, and there's a virtues alignment, simpatico, it lights up the same part of the brain as it does when you see like puppies or your kids, or it's not maybe divine love, but it's definitely painting something in the brain that isn't obedience or submission, or because I have no choice, or impulsivity, or any of the other things that much of modern marketing is based off of. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to be on here with you, is because, like, we're speaking the same language. It's like Meister Eckhart, the old German mystic from 1,000 years ago, said, is all mystics speak the same language. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I love Eckhart Tolle. He's great. It's so cool. I love this podcast. I love this times that we're living in, because like people like you and I are, I don't want to say finally getting a voice, but our voice is getting louder,
Yeah,
because
it's certainly needed more. Yeah.
start paying less attention to their fears.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still out there, of course. It's fear is
Right.
such a big part of our lives, and decision making is subconscious and blah blah blah. But like, I feel people are up leveling. Like, everybody's just expanding their consciousness, however slowly, and we're gonna buy less into the bullshit. Like in the
Yeah.
coming 10, 20 years, you can manipulate human behavior. I mean, you will always be able to manipulate human behavior,
Sure. Sure.
but the voice of consciousness, the voice of uh, love is getting bigger, and I'm so excited to see that out there because I, just like you, probably grew up in a world where we saw a lot of like not love. It's like, what's this all about?
Hmm.
So it's like that's why I
Right.
made this my mission. I made love my mission because I saw
Hmm.
the people I grew up with didn't experience this like ineffable value and just
Hmm.
inexplainable, intangible thing that's called love or care. Or
Hmm.
yes,
Hmm.
you experience it to some degree, but I don't think enough. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
More we can share that with others, just like you do with your work. It's changing people.
Right. Yeah. And I think that we are in a world of very painful evolution right now, with I'll call it what it is, a political crisis in the United States where, and now it's affecting the world. And it's an interesting sort of trifurcation of society of you've got let's from an audience archetype standpoint, you got MAGA, and you got the apathetic, and then you got everyone else. And what's interesting in society is you've always sort of had that dark side. It's always been there. And I'm a history nerd, and I think one of the great disservices, and it's actually to me a sign of privilege when people don't know history. It's a privilege. It's privilege. It's like, well, of course you don't know history. If you're a white dude with money, you don't need to know history. But everybody else knows history, and so getting into that history, that dark side has always been there, kind of the ego side, or the collective narcissism, or the collective ego. It just takes different forms. In the United States, it's taken the form of white supremacy and Christian nationalism since our inception, but it wasn't the only force. Then you got the apathetic. During the American Revolution, only 30% of the people supported the revolution. There were some, and there were like 10% or 20% that are loyalists to England, and the rest were sort of, I don't know, whatever the price of eggs are, that's the side I'm going to go on, metaphorically.
Hmm.
And there's apathy. And sadly, but to our benefit, you and I as entrepreneurs and what we're doing, the apathetic, and this is maybe a very dark statement, but the apathetic, if you're going to sell to them, require some level of manipulation because they are kind of just like bots almost. They just don't give a shit.
Yeah, floating.
Yeah. And so you got to make them care. And when people are sort of apathetic, the thing that they care about is just themselves.
Mm.
And that's why the messaging from collective narcissism, which could be a political movement or it could be a prestigious brand, it's the same thing. It's just collective narcissism branding to the apathy, trying to extract from them. The beautiful thing that I've noticed at 54, been in branding for 20 plus years, is watching that other go up and up and up. There's more and more. And it's very encouraging, especially when you see how much turmoil there is in the world right now, is that there is an elevation of consciousness happening. I'm absolutely certain of it.
Yeah, yeah, it's special times, and people can feel it. This it is exciting. There's a lot of stuff happening. The last 10 years, it's just like, oh, same old, same old. Like it's gonna be another war or be another thing. It's just like people are starting to really wake up and be like, no, we don't want this or that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm very excited for the times that we live in because there is movement. People
Mm-hmm.
are
Yeah.
really ready to change things within, right?
Yeah. Enough people. We need because it's evolution is painful. That's what makes it evolution.
Hmm.
And for some people, this is very painful, and especially people that look a lot like me, is what I call a swam, which is a straight white American male. That it's the if you do the work of consciousness, you can't look away from things that aren't right. So that there's an awakening there that's very, very painful that I've noticed with other people that are swams as well, straight white American men, is those that are awakening. It's like, holy shit, how did I not see this before? I'm like, well, that's the pain of awakening.
Yeah.
There's a reason they called Jesus the man of sorrows, you know?
I love that. Um, so what is your, let's, switch gears a little bit. What is your
Sure.
definition of a spiritual entrepreneur or successful spiritual entrepreneur?
I love that question. And I think it is, I'm going to use a Spanish word that is called consequente. And there's no real translation for this in English. That's why I like this word as a linguist. Consequente, as it relates to your question, means that your virtues or values, the things that are intrinsic to you. So not your identity that you've adopted or who you were told to be, but what Carl Jung called the core self, the soul, let's say, that is aligned with how you are monetizing your skills and experiences and gifts, and it's creating an impact in the world. So there's a triangulation there. And it may not be the perfectly shaped triangle because life is messy, but the happiest entrepreneurs I know are the ones that have done that triangulation. And it's the thing about it is that the monetization of it is often the last thing that happens. Because you're breaking away from old systems and you're showing the world who you truly are. So I have a whole list of branding mantras, and one of them is make the world react to you. Well, that sounds like super, like something you put on an Instagram, meme or something on the surface. But the last word is the most important one, you. So you don't make the world react to your hologram that you created, which most branding is just basically creating holograms. Make the world react to you, who you really are. And that's consequente then. When those things are balanced, and they're not balanced, but when those things are triangulated, eventually they balance out and just kind of this beautiful thing. No coincidence that the triangle is a symbol of change. The triangle is the strongest shape, like for weight bearing shape is the triangle. There's a lot of not surprising correlations to the fact that it's a triangle.
Yeah, so cool. And what are at the corners of those triangles? What are the three?
So the corners are, I refer to the first corner, the inner corner, as virtue, using a Stoic word, for a word from Stoicism or Buddhism. So that's your core self. You're rooted in your core self, not who you're pretending to be. The second one is impact in the world, and the third one is monetization. And I don't think it's a coincidence that most spiritual entrepreneurs I know come from marginalized groups. They're members of the LGBTQ community. They are women of color. They are immigrants. I don't run into a lot of other swams that are spiritual entrepreneurs. And it's because they don't have to. That's number one. They don't have to do it. Number two is who they are is a complete construct. And you can tell this in their marketing. There's nothing there. And there's a game that I play with my clients, especially my corporate clients, is I simply call it bullshit bingo. So they take all of the words from their industry and put it on and literally I have a grid, a bingo card, and they fill it in. So they, I'm doing an executive retreat with the leadership team to work on their brand, and they fill it all in and it's funny, and they fill it all in, and then we pull up their website, and there's like, oh no. And so the first person, the way I've done this before, the first person to yell bingo has to buy drinks when we go out later.
Oh, that's so funny.
So I'm having fun with it. I'm gamifying it, but it's not all that funny because sameness is the opposite of branding. And so, there's those components there. You can master monetization, especially if you start off with money. The illusion of Musk, for example, as a self-made billionaire. He's not like Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban started with nothing. Musk didn't start with nothing. And you can also tell there's a difference with their level of consciousness too, by where money comes from. And then you have your impact without that connection to your soul, and that's the martyrs. Often in nonprofits, there's a sense of martyrdom, and not all, of course, nonprofits, but there's a sense of martyrdom within nonprofits that we're doing good work, and you're just greedy capitalists. I'm like, yeah, but you're not connected to your soul, and you're not making any money, because money's power. It's energy. It's not evil unto itself.
Yeah, very true.
No money, no impact, really, honestly, in modern society.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, I think a lot of people are at that point where they're either realizing that I have to do something that I am spiritually excited about or
Yes.
passionate, to leave out the spiritual part. And then there's others that already are going, they're like, finally, this thing is working,
Yeah.
because people are waking up and engaging. Like, for example, like my wife, she's a Course in Miracles teacher, which I'm sure you know the book.
Yeah.
And not many people do.
Yeah.
So that's good. I love that. So it's for people who don't know, it's a spiritual text that basically talks about non-duality and how to shift your mindset from fear to love in any given moment.
Right.
And one of the big premises is that everything else in this world is an illusion because it's created by us humans, right? But not to diverge too far from the topic, she's been teaching and talking about this book and her interpretation of those teachings for 15 years. Started her Instagram account 8 years ago. This year was the first time she actually is monetizing it very well. There's a multitude of factors. Like, before, she didn't really know how to get the audience from like zero to hero, pretty much, like from like, I'm just engaging with this account, let me get something free. It's of course there's other learning curves, like in terms of like mechanisms that need to be placed on social.
Sure. Absolutely.
But it's also, she's feeling that the audience is really like, there's more, like people want it,
Well, it's interesting what you're saying there, Christian. As an example of something I teach my clients all the time is, it's almost the reverse of everything you're taught about marketing. Is your marketing is not, your audience is not who you're looking for. Your audience is who's looking for you. And this is why I start with the school of philosophy, your school of philosophy, because you're adopting or adapting, and there's a sort of a spiritual genealogy, if you will, or like a handing down of tradition in a good way. And one of those is, when the student is willing, the teacher appears. Another one is know thyself, the oldest motivational quote in the world. A lot of stuff was first written down in the Tao Te Ching. And so what I remind people is,
which is funny because, sorry to interject there.
It's okay.
I had someone on the show like a week ago, and he's a Taoist expert, all kinds of things. And he said, the first sentence in the Tao, which, not that many people you might know because you're such a, erudite person, is Dao ke Dao, Fei Cheng Dao, which means the Tao that can be put into words is not the Tao, which ties back into like poetry, love.
Yes, exactly.
Concepts.
Right.
Like, as soon as you start talking about it, you probably lost already 30% of it. You know what I mean? Because it's so ineffable. It's like, and that, I think that is where the human magic is,
Right. Yes, it is. And that's what I love about what I do is when you participate in someone's elevation of their consciousness, it then goes to the next thing, which is, okay, how do I put this out into the world? And to me, that's what entrepreneurism is. I point this out a lot. that feudalism in Europe, European feudalism, was not ended by, a lot of people don't realize this from the history, it was ended by two things. And we're going to have to end this version of corporate feudalism the same way. Number one is entrepreneurism. It was the crafters, and it was the invention of the printing press.
What's feudalism? Sorry to interrupt.
Feudalism is what you would see like in the Middle Ages. From basically, feudalism happened in Europe from the countries that were not occupied by the Romans. They had feudalistic models, and then after Europe was Christianized, the kings became like the anointed ones, and then you had like if you watch Game of Thrones or Vikings or any movie or show about that era, you can see feudalism, which is we would call it like a caste system, and it's like your job is to extract. God has decided that your lot in life is to be extracted from, because you were not born into royalty.
I understand. And how does it translate into like today's corporate feudalism?
Corporate feudalism, I actually jokingly spell it two ways. It's feudalism, like the system from the Middle Ages, and also feudalism, like it doesn't trying to find meaning in a corporate job is basically impossible. I'm not, if you're a spiritual person, it depends on the company, but generally it's pretty hard. And so corporate feudalism is based off of the distribution or the distribution of power. And we can apply it to something where we look at like Citizens United, which was a court case that decided that corporations were people too, even though they don't get taxed. Corporations don't really get taxed in the US. The people in them do, but the corporations don't. But Citizens United said they could give unlimited money to political action committees. And they did that. And then it's produced this sort of, over the last 50 years in particular, it's produced kind of a ruling class. And so you take someone, for example, like Musk, who is going around with his chainsaw and talking about getting rid of government waste, yet he's made billions of dollars off of government contracts that really have not benefited the American people. They benefited him and made him the richest man on earth, but what do we get out of it by giving him those tax credits or those literal government contracts for SpaceX? Those type of things are, in my view, corporate feudalism. So we go back to, from a historical standpoint, there were the two things. There was entrepreneurism, the original French word for entrepreneur, which is basically the creators. So you could look at the artists, you could look at the manufacturers, the makers, and you look at the printing press, and you started to break apart this. It's like, wait a minute, and this is one of the most beautiful moments in history, is when the person that was not born into status realized they could make something that other people wanted to make money at it. That's when feudalism began to end. And the same thing happens here. There's a difference between corporate feudalism and free market. And I love to look at it this way. If you were to take Etsy's revenue, global revenue of the Etsy makers, it would be the 7th or 8th largest economy in the world. Not Etsy's revenue, but the money produced by Etsy makers. That's a remarkable thing. And this is why I spend a lot of time arguing with economic progressives too. And especially as a business person. But the other thing, Christian, that we already touched on this, but there's a historical context here, is the second part, that ended feudalism in the Middle Ages, was Enlightenment. It was Martin Luther taking on the Catholic Church. It was the Enlightenment of science, of Newton, and Newtonian science was a kind of enlightenment. And if we were, as entrepreneurs, as spiritual entrepreneurs in particular, we're out making shit that didn't exist before, and we're teaching other people to do the same thing. And we are living enlightenment, and we're encouraging people to go inward. The same thing's going to happen. It's going to break up this monopoly on attention that these large corporations have, and that's exciting to me.
Yeah.
And because we don't imagine not needing at all Amazon. Wouldn't it be cool? Now, technically we don't, but it's easy. Or imagine that you're going to go get your food from a locally sourced place, farm to, the literal farm to table, or grow it yourself. Imagine that. I mean, all these things, and it's not for everybody, but it is an imagination of a future different than the one that we were told is happening now.
Mm-hmm.
That's our job as branders and marketers.
Yeah, I love that. Tell me about the impact of AI and your projection and your, I guess, take on it. Well, however,
Well,
whichever
I look
direction.
at AI again through the lens of history. As Bill Gates said, AI is the greatest invention of all time, greater than the Gutenberg press, greater than the internet, and so he would kind of know, I guess. And so I am not a doomsdayer about AI. For one thing, is AI will never replace spirituality, true spirituality. It can't. AI will never produce choice because it can't. It's all still zeros and ones. And it could be generative intelligence, which a lot of humans are. When I talk about the apathetic and they feel like bots, that makes you replaceable. If you think you're a bot, you're going to get replaced by a bot that's cheaper. Well, AI is going to be like that for a lot of people. It's going to cause a lot of suffering related to certain jobs. That is true. But it's also going to be liberating too. Just as my son, Caden, is a dad promoter shout out at Reluctant Hobo on Instagram, is a full-time artist because of Instagram. He can make a living off of Instagram. That's amazing as a full-time commercial artist,
Wow.
And so AI, well, I'll give you a snippet of a conversation with my stepson Andre. I don't like the word stepson, but my son Andre who's 15. He said, I asked him, I said, what do you think this generation is going to happen to your generation because of things like AI and TikTok and all that? And I don't know if I can say the F word, but can I say the F word or no? I can't remember. What's your, okay. All right. So because I want to quote him, he said, "Oh, we're fucked." And I said, really? Why? And he told me, and I said, he goes, but not all of us. Because if you're smart, you're going to be okay. It's the people that are not smart that are absorbed by, and this I'm translating into sort of adult spiritual language, but they're the ones that are really in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that was AI is going to make smart people smarter and dumb people dumber, is his sort of summation of it. And I don't disagree with that. Not that people are dumb, and I'm not judging people's intelligence level.
Yeah.
I'm judging if I'm judging anything, I'm judging their level of self-awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very accurate assessment, and I believe, if you just if we listen to our kids, imagine the kids being the teachers versus in us being the
Yeah.
students.
Yes.
Parents, like, I'm the student of my child. Like, he's my master.
Yes.
He's
Right.
my Yoda. And imagine
Yes.
those kids. Like, the more that we get older, other people that are older than us are gonna die. and,
Right.
and you and I are gonna sit here and be like, what do we want this world to be like with all the money and the
Right.
things that and we have a different level of consciousness, and at some
Right.
point imagine those kids teaching us the ways versus
Right.
top down as it is
Yeah,
now.
I love that. And it goes back to what we were talking about with corporate feudalism, is that this millennials, it started with millennials and it really happened with Gen Zers down to now Gen Alpha, is what I taught my sons are older, in early 30s, late 20s, and my older sons are my grown ones, the ones I helped make. But I never went with what I called the good path. Get good grades, you can go to a good school and get a good job and meet a good partner and live in a good neighborhood and have some good kids and a good career and a retirement, a good funeral.
Good life. Yeah.
A good life. It's like, nah, no. Have a meaningful life. And
Yeah.
to do that, you have to know what your thing is. You imagine this, Christian. Imagine if that a huge part of school, and this is kind of what the baccalaureate model is outside of the US, is to find out what you're here to do, not what job to go get. That alone by itself with a little bit of consciousness would be impactful, huge.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unnecessary to participate in a system or a structure that doesn't feed your soul. And I think that's a beautiful thing, but they still need branding, and they still need wisdom, and they still need counsel, and there's all those things. These same tools are still important. They're just going to be used in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be curious to see how future generations deal with values that were a little bit more inherent to our or your generation, which is like just patience. Things are slower, like everything in like 10 years is going to be so fast. Hey, Neil, Brand, you want to start this? Cool. It's done in 10 minutes. But is that the thing you really want to do? Because, you know what I mean? Like, I've started multiple businesses. The only ones that stuck around so far is Love Pixel Agency, because I have a passion for making love tangible on the web. And then my tea brand, which is One with Tea on Amazon, because I love tea and everything that it does for people. But it's like, do I want to start a tea brand? You know what I mean? It's like, have to sit down, because it's going to be very easy in the future to like start anything, right? But what can your frequency and energetic level support for that brand to grow, for things, you know what I mean? Because that's going to be interesting to see that people are just going to be stay in the center and be able to long-term support the project, versus we just do this for a year, it didn't work, do the next thing for a year, it didn't work. You're going to be forced back into like, what do I really want to do with life?
Yes, right. And to being a creator, not like a real creator. And this, I think it's amazing that there are people like Mr. Beast, who, I think he's going to be, or is, if he's not already, the first YouTube billionaire or whatever, But the amount of good, you talk about impact, the amount of good he's done in the world is amazing. Yeah. Or people that can, I think of young Pueblo, the poet that was basically discovered on Instagram 10 years ago, and or so many creatives, like true creators, that because of modern tools they're able to make a living. My current favorite one is Substack. There's people that are writers that really are dedicated to it, that have been able to quit their jobs and write full time. We're right on the cusp of that moment in the dark ages. We look around, we look at the headlines, we look at all the shit going on in the world, and it feels like the dark ages. But if we look at it from a historical perspective and we see this little ray of light on the horizon, it's the same little kind of crack that was happening around the time that the Gutenberg press was invented. And I think AI is going to be far more a tool of liberation, a tool of expansion, than it is a tool of contraction, or let's put it this way, it's going to be a tool of expansion, not a tool of extraction, like so many tools are.
Yeah, I totally agree. And not to forget that, the US has its Pluto return, which I'm not huge into astrology, but I do follow it a little bit. It only happens every 300 years.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was last time that Pluto return happened in the US when we had the revolution.
Yes, exactly. I saw that too. Yeah.
So,
and I don't know what it means, as the saying goes, all systems are flawed, some are useful.
Yeah.
There's that. There's also, Christian, this wheel that can be, you can see it in the patterns in history, from order to corruption to chaos. And this is why it's so important to be connected to our own inner feminine, because the word chaos originally, in the symbol of a dragon, as an example, they were symbols of feminism, or the divine feminine, and they were suppressed or rebranded by the church states as that are bad things, because chaos was threatening to order.
Mm.
Chaos is not threatening to order. Chaos is threatening to corruption.
Mm. Interesting.
And this is why we as all humans need to tap into their feminine, the creator, that part of them, but also women as the gender of women, and as need to be like put women in charge of everything we can possibly, because that's what we need right now, because there's an iterative energy that comes out of that.
Yeah.
Things like that. And I think that that's where it always comes back to is if you tell me what's going on inside of you, I will tell you how you are experiencing the world. And it's not, you see this, like, it's one of my criticisms of what I call the consciousness industry, because it's an industry now.
Mm-hmm.
People shilling stuff, that, and sort of this sort of culty anti-science side of the wellness industry, or the consciousness industry. And that is, if your consciousness is not inspiring you to go out and create impact in the world, is it really consciousness, or is it something else? And it's like, it's because it is a great temptation to be insular now. So, like, I'm going to stay in here because this is peaceful and safe, and it's what I say. A lot of people feel like they have blessing when it's really just privilege.
Mm.
And that's the people I'm poking at constantly in my writings. Not related directly to branding, but sometimes, because there's an overlap with a lot of privilegedly white dudes on LinkedIn that don't like me. So
I love that. Yeah, it's very courageous to get out there and know that you creating, you know, people who think, like, you just create this, you make people think. It's not just,
mhm.
yeah, I
Right.
agree, he's great and rosy and you're so fantastic, and
Yeah.
but actually, you thought provoking,
Yeah.
So,
And that's my
that's
goal. And it goes to love. I mean, my definition of love is just not looking away.
mm,
Don't look away. Like, if you see something that troubles you and your impulse is to look away, look closer.
mm,
To put it in the Jesus parable, look at the man in the ditch in the story of the Good Samaritan.
mm,
And there's many other spiritual masters have their own versions of that. So it's if you can't see the person in the ditch, I give a talk called Namaste Branding, and it's basically the divine. If you don't see the divine in yourself, you will see your audience as targets, and you will treat them as targets, and they will treat you as a transaction. If you see the divine in yourself, you will brand differently. You will communicate differently. And you can use all the same stuff, websites, digital, Google ads, funnels, and all that. But if you're doing it because you're trying to connect with them, you're trying to invite them to something as opposed to manipulate or interrupt or any of those things, that's the difference, is
mm.
your level of consciousness. Um,
Beautiful. That is a big point, you know, for us to like create from that space.
yes,
So we're coming towards the end of the episode, and I want to ask you a couple, personal questions.
sure.
Um, so let me start with this one. Who or what inspires you the most currently on your spiritual or entrepreneurial journey?
Well, my partner, Virginia, we've been together for almost 5 years, and she is my chief muse in a lot of ways, especially related to social consciousness. Um, as I've told her frequently, she's made me a dangerous man, because I understand things systemically now. Her background is a complexity scientist and as an activist, growing up in the revolution in Nicaragua in the 1970s and 80s. So she comes from a very, very different background than the gringo from the ranch,
Mm,
and so my friends, to name names, like one of my dearest friends, Juan Kingsbury in Phoenix, is a muse to me. and we wrestle with these things. Or my beautiful friend Dan Dowman in the UK, another escapee from high control religion. My sons, all three of them, are very inspiring from my sons and my daughters-in-law too. They feel like my daughters too, but my son's partners, my grandkids, inspire me spiritually too.
Yeah.
And this sounds fun. I don't know where the meme comes from, but it's a speech where he gets up there. I think it was somebody that says, "First of all, I'd like to thank me." Have you seen that? It's like, I
Yeah.
don't remember who it is. I think it's Snoop Dogg, but I don't know who the voice is, but it shows up in memes a lot, on reels and stuff. But I inspire me, in the sense that I'm not saying that from an arrogant standpoint. I'm saying I've come such a long fucking way from the broken, like my whole life up until about 5 years ago was basically like trauma buffering from my childhood and dopamine chasing because of ADHD. And underneath it, this growing seed of a soul. And it's not that I don't need dopamine, and it's not that I don't sometimes have like still PTSD, but I'm proud of me. And especially when I look around in society, and again, there's just not a lot of guys that look like me. 54-year-old white dudes, rural, no college degree. I did a funny little thing. I asked ChatGPT to analyze my writings and give me describe me as a writer. And I gave it a bunch of poems and things, and it comes back, and I said, who do I remind you of poetry-wise? And it says, you are a redneck. You're an enlightened redneck. That's what ChatGPT told me. And I'm like, damn, that's so true.
Wow.
Because I haven't hunted in a while, but I would, or fishing, or, camping, or proper gun ownership, and outdoors, and ranch life, and dirt and grit and pickup trucks. And that's all still me.
I love that.
Anyway, that was encouraging.
Beautiful. Next question. What are the 3 words you want people to know you for after you leave this physical plane?
Courage, sincerity, and leader.
Beautiful. Thanks for that. And then the last part of the episode, I always like to give over to the guest of the episode and just like do a little visioning exercise. So like, what
Sure.
are you looking to call in? What are you looking to, just like, what are your goals for your brand, or, like for your company? What are you looking to call in the coming years?
Yeah, I just did this on Sunday, so good timing. We are in July. We're moving to Mexico City for at least 3 years, because that's Andre. We want him to be able to finish high school there. But our family, on the foster side, they all live in Portland now, Portland, Oregon, and I want to attract 2 high dollar enough clients in the Portland, Seattle area that Massive, the company Virginia and I own, can serve. Hers is an executive coach in leadership development, and me as a brand, a fractional CMO, brand strategist. And finding a B Corp or a social impact private equity firm that needs support for their portfolio founders, and that's what I want.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I think just the fact that you're putting it out there, you're starting to attract that more and more. And I think if companies are not doing that sort of, mind shift change now, then it's needed. This is what I'm trying to say,
Yes.
and I think
Right. Yeah.
and you're gonna be very successful. I think you just need to get yourself a little bit more visible, because I think a lot of people
Yeah.
look for that. they don't really get that like that's what could like completely change their culture or company
Yeah.
or so that's
So
huge.
I also have a podcast, and so when I'm a guest, I feel honored to be a guest, and so I always ask the host a question. If I may ask you a question,
Of course, of course.
is how can I reciprocate? And you can tell me later if you don't know now, but it's just from one creator to another. Is you invited me on stage with you for a public jam session, and I want to reciprocate in some way. So
Yeah. Yeah, reciprocation in terms of this podcast is always appreciated, of course, in sharing the message, sharing the posts that we will share with you that are coming up, and then keeping us in mind for any type of branding, website. Like we're more on the
hmm
execution side. I feel like you're a
yeah,
lot more
right,
strategy shifting, and
yeah,
then we actually do the stuff. You know what I mean? And
right,
so yeah, just keep us in mind if you ever come across anybody who's like, yeah, I know the guy who's like
yeah.
he
All
lives
right,
what he says, and he has a great agency. That
all
is
right.
always
I'll talk to you about that when we're not recording. So
okay. Amazing. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for asking too. It's like
you're welcome.
your level of consciousness. Like, oh, guess what? He's a creator. I know where you're at. It's like let me
Yeah,
get this back. So
yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, and then last any closing words? Like, what are words you want to leave the audience with? And then where can people find you?
Yeah, always is three things I always tell people: make shit you can't Google, make. Number two is when you don't know what to do, go inward. Don't hire a consultant. Go inward. You can hire a coach, but you have the answers.
Hmm.
And the third is make the world react to you. And if you do those three things, then nothing but good will happen. And I'm super findable. Two main platforms would be our website, massivechange.co. And my other main platform lately in the last couple of months is Substack. So you just go look for Justin Foster, or my publication is called Foster Thinking. And of course, all the socials, except for X, I'm not on there anymore. So
Cool. Well, thanks so much for being part of the show. It's been an honor having you on. I love the philosophical depth, your knowledge, everything that you bring. It's very cool to have those type of deep conversation in any direction. I feel like you
right,
you know so much about everything, and it's like history, this, that, about this. Very cool.
yeah.
So thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, Christian.